All right. These work. Nice. All right, players. Thanks for coming out tonight. Uh, Topic tonight's going to be a little bit about the short game. I was going to call it short game 101, but that's a little too basic. It's short game 201, a little more advanced discussion about short game. Now, this one, I'm not really talking much about bunkers. This is mostly for short game shots off of grass and rough. And we're going to get into a couple of, I guess, what I would call keys to success. So hopefully, we'll be able to pick up some stuff. Questions are welcome as we go along, and I'll do my best to answer them. So, first thing I like you to think about is what are the fundamentals of a good short game? Or what are some traits that good players that have good short games have? What kind of fundamentals do you think of when you think of a good short game? What kind of comes to mind? You can toss out some ideas. Distance control. Good one. Soft hands. Distance control, soft hands. Pick the right club. Club selection. Good. These are all things. How you swing it. Having a good swing. I like it. I put together a list, in my opinion, of what I think of the fundamentals are. And a lot of times when I do these kinds of presentations, my ideas of fundamentals are different than like what you might read in a golf magazine or a golf instruction book. But I think fundamentals that I think of when I think of having a good short game, the first number one, most important fundamental is you have to learn how to make solid contact with the golf ball. And that means hitting the face of the club. Seems obvious, right? Not the edges. And somewhere in a perfect world, somewhere between the second and the fifth groove. Okay, that's getting kind of specific, but just think we want to hit the golf ball on the face, maybe not the grass, and maybe not the middle of the ball with the leading edge. Fair enough? I think almost every short game catastrophe that I've ever witnessed, and I've witnessed a ton, and I've been a part of a ton, the number one killer is poor contact, chunks and thins and flubs and duffs and skating it over the green. So solid contact is the most important, and I'm going to get into that, what characteristics are of solid contact as we go along. I did put these in kind of an order. They're all important. Second most important, in my opinion, is judgment. And that's, when I talk about judgment, I'm talking about how you predict the ball is going to react when it lands. Is it going to land and roll? Is it going to land and stop? Is it going to check? Is it going to release? What's it going to do when it lands? I remember I was teaching a short game lesson to one of my students, and we're hitting a shot from like me to Cliff, and he's like, "I'm going to throw it up in the air, and it's going to come back 5 feet." I'm like, nobody in the world could ever hit that shot you described. I don't understand how you think that's what you're going to do, standing here with a 10 handicap in this range ball. But let's see it. Show me. So he did not have good judgment. That was a good discussion in our lesson. Another big one is the shot selection, or it could be club selection. Basically, trying to pick the right shot to hit, the right height, the right distance, the right landing spot. This does imply that you have more than one shot in your arsenal. Maybe some of you do, maybe some of you don't. Distance control is up there for sure. And finally, the equipment makes a big difference when it comes to short game. I think a lot of players maybe, don't consider how important fresh grooves, good golf balls, things like that are to having the ability to hit some of the shots I'm going to be describing tonight. A lot of times I'll have a lesson with a student, maybe their most lofted club is a pitching wedge or something like that, and we want to do a short game lesson. I'm like, I couldn't even do this. This is way too hard because you're using a pitching wedge and you're using golf balls that don't spin and things like that. So these are the kinds of things we'll be kind of going over tonight. I'm not going to go quite in order with today's presentation. Contact's a pretty big subject, and that's going to be more middle to end, but I also want to talk about a few myths with the short game, and some of these are things you might have heard, some of the things are things you might have said. Sorry if you have. But there's a couple in here that, and some of them are maybe you've never heard. These are just things I hear when I'm talking to students or when I'm playing with golfers. Some myths around the short game. This is a pretty common one, is that each club in your bag has a certain ratio of carry versus roll. Has anybody ever heard that kind of thought? Like sand wedges 1-to-1, pitching wedges 2-to-1, different things like that. Not true. When in doubt, keep it low. Some people really preach this one. I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. And at the end, we'll kind of go back over these. And hopefully with all this new information you've learned, you'll be able to help me identify where the flaws are in this logic. 60-degree wedges are only for good players. They're scary. I looked exactly at you because you're a good player. We hit down to make the ball go up. Anybody ever heard that one? You got to hit down on it to make it go up. Mythy. Your worst putt is better than your best chip. Now this one I hear, this isn't really a myth, but I hear this one misspoken a lot. Okay, your best chip probably goes in. And your worst putt probably doesn't. So that's not quite the right way to say it. But I do hear that sometimes, especially when people really want to putt it. Hinge and hold is how tour players do it. Anybody ever hear of hinge and hold? Phil Mickelson's somewhat famous method. I'll have a handful say, hey, how's it going? I have a handful of students that'll come and they'll be like, all right, what are you trying to do? And they're like, oh, I'm going to hinge and hold. Well, we got an hour's worth of discussion about that. So we'll get into why some of these aren't necessarily true here as we go along. All right, starting with some of those fundamentals, I want to start with just judgment, okay? These are things that you should or you could pay attention to when you're about to approach and hit a short game shot that I think you should, and a lot of people don't. This is an area I think gets undervalued. People don't talk about this. So there's certain things, let's say I'm hitting a shot, it can be any type of a pitch or a chip, any kind of shot that's got a little air under it, landing on the green. There's certain conditions that will make it stop faster, and certain conditions that will make it stop, or make it roll out more, all right? Regardless of how much, let's just assume for all these shots, I'm putting the exact same amount of spin and height on the ball. Things that might make it stop faster, anybody have any ideas? Here we go, okay, you guys are thinking the right, there you go. So if it lands on a upslope, it might stop a little faster. If it lands on a downslope, rolls out more. If the landing spot is below your feet, below where you're hitting, it's going to stop a little faster. I want to make sure that makes sense. So let's say I'm standing on top of this desk up here, and I'm hitting a shot to the floor. So I'm up here, and my landing spot's down there. That ball is going to land and stop a little faster because the ball is going to be traveling more downward. So it's going to be descending more. Versus if I was down here, and I was going to try to land a shot on top of this tabletop, that ball is going to be landing very flat, and it will roll out a lot more. So whenever the landing spot's above you, anticipate a little more rollout. Landing spot above. These are going to be very complementary, so you can probably guess the second one. Into the wind is a big deal, way bigger deal than most people think. If you're chipping it into the wind, it's usually in your favor. The ball will stop significantly faster. And if you're downwind, it's going to be a little bit trickier for sure. We don't all play Bermuda grass here. So anybody familiar with Bermuda? It's the grainy crap that's in Florida. The islands, Texas, Phoenix, Hawaii. We don't have to deal with it, thank God, much in Colorado. Bermuda has like grain to it, so the grass, the blades of grass, and even the roots underneath grow a certain way. So if you're landing a ball into the grain, or think about landing it, like when you pet a cat the wrong way or a dog the wrong way, it's like landing into the grain. It's going to stop really quick. It's landing down grain. It's going to take off. And finally, just the general conditions of the greens. The greens are kind of soft, kind of sticky. You're out there, it's like June 5th, beautiful green day. The course has been watered and mown, and the turf is like, it's not dew anymore. It's kind of sticky and soft. It's going to grab real good. This time of year, turf is dry. Even if it's not that firm, it's got sand on it. There's not a lot of friction on it. It's going to run out. So does that make sense for the most part right there? I think anytime you're approaching a short game shot, those are just things to look for, just to try to start to guess, like what's going to happen when this ball hits the ground. Is it going to take off, or is it going to land and stop? Sometimes you have some of one, some of the other, and this and that. All right. Next one, different types of shots. Now, I think one of the problems that people get into with the short game is they only have a couple of shots, or they might think they need a ton of shots. And you don't really need a ton of shots. You just need a couple. I'm going to go over the ones that I use the most. And if you were to watch golf on TV, watch the tour players and stuff, you're going to see, they're going to have a couple of different shots that they use all the time. So off of a tight lie, and I'm going to use that term a lot tonight. Tight lie means like a fairway lie, a fringe lie, a real short grass situation. Off a tight lie, a couple of options you have would be putter. People don't play the putter enough. The ones that I use a lot, I'll use a low trajectory, low spin shot a lot. Some people call that a bump and run, a chip and roll. There's things like that. It comes off low. It doesn't check very much. It takes off. I use that a lot. I use a low trajectory, high spin shot. Does everybody have that shot? Low tour spinner? We might learn something about that tonight. I use that one a lot. I use a medium height, high spinning shot, one that lands real soft. And then occasionally I'll hit a super high one off of that tight lie, although that sometimes is turf dependent, and I use that usually as a last resort. Hitting high shots off of tight lies doesn't always work out. So, I mean, if you think about it, besides the putter, there's I probably hit 90% of my shots with just these three things. I mean, it's not like you don't have to have a whole bag of tricks. You just have to have a couple of different kinds of shots so that you can hit the good landing spots, which we'll get to in a second. Out of the rough, I only have 2 shots, and on tour you'll see mostly just 2 shots. You'll see a low or medium shot with no spin. Rough usually doesn't spin. And you'll see like a high, soft one out of the rough a lot. When you watch golf on TV, you'll see these guys make a nice big swing, and the ball just kind of softly floofs up and doesn't have a lot of spin on it, but it stops pretty quick because it is high. Right? Well, that's all you need. 2 shots in the rough, 3 shots. We'll say probably almost everybody in this room already has does everybody in here have like a bump and run at least, like a low little runner? You might not have some high spin shots. Not everybody in this room might. Everybody already has a putter, and the high one you might not need that much anyway. So you really might only need to pick up a shot, 1 or 2 new shots if you want to like improve your short game. Questions about that? Shot selection. All right. Let's talk about good and bad landing zones. So when you're looking at a green, got one up here. We've got like some features, right? Unless you're playing flat irons, pretty flat. But greens have little mounds and undulations and little, cuts where the rough turns into the fringe and where the fringe turns into the green, and little upslopes and little things like that. And some landing spots are better than others. The cool thing about having a couple of shots in your arsenal is that you can then hit the good landing spot. It makes it a lot easier versus if you only have 1 shot in your bag of tricks, then sometimes you're going to be forced to land that shot on a bad landing spot, and that's going to make a shot even harder than it already is. So characteristics of good landing spots. They're predictable. Predictable means you can have a pretty good guess about what's going to happen when the ball lands. If you're looking at a patch of wet, divotty fringe that's got divots in it, it's soggy, it's wet, it's sandy, that might not be that predictable. You might not be able to tell if that ball is going to land in there and skid or slide, or if it's going to land and stick. But if it's just like a nice flat piece of green grass like the green, that's probably pretty predictable. You can probably guess what's going to happen. Generally speaking, we want to land it on flat spots or upslopes. They're nice and predictable. I like large landing spots. I don't want to generally try to hit it to like something the size of a dinner plate if I can help it. I'm not that good. Some of you guys might be, but I'm not. Another good thing to look for is concave features. So concave, think like bowl-shaped, like a bowl-shaped feature. If you were trying to, for example, if your landing spot has a little bit of a bowl shape. Let's say my golf ball's over here and I'm hitting it over here. My landing spot's a little bit bowl shaped. Well, if I aim for the bottom of the bowl and I leave it a little short, it lands on the what? Downslope. So I left it short, but it landed on the downslope. What happens? Kicks forward. So it ends up about the same as if it landed here. If I hit it a little long and it lands on the upslope, what happens? Kills it a little bit, ends up in about the same spot. So concave features make the golf balls nestle all together. All right, that makes sense? You can probably guess some of the bad ones. Let's see. Oh, come on, mouse. Unpredictable. That's the turf that you can't tell if it's going to be sticky or slidey. Downslopes, generally speaking, aren't great because they kick the ball forward. They add a bunch of speed to it. I'm not saying it's the worst thing, but downslopes are generally not as good as upslopes. Landing areas that are small require a lot more precision. I'm not, like I said, I don't want to be trying to hit a real small target. And then anything convex or mounded. So if you think about the opposite of what I just said, if we have a surface that's like this, kind of a mound, and our mission, we're thinking we want to land it right at the top of the mound. Now think about what happens to my dispersion, right? Anything that lands short stays extra short. Anything that lands long goes extra long, and our dispersion or our range of possible results gets really huge. So it's hard to have a nice predictable pattern if you're landing it on the top of a mound. I also like to avoid transition zones. Transition zones are things like where the fringe turns into the green, that cut line where the fringe turns into the green, because the fringe might be sticky, maybe, and the green might be firm. Or we've all seen it, if you actually did land right on that spot, what happens if you land right on the cut line? Big old fringe kicker boost, right? So in this case, like on this little picture, like, I wouldn't want to land a ball where the fringe turns into the green unless I had no other option. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying here is not necessarily the landing zone, not necessarily where you think the ball landed right there, go right to the top of the green.
Correct. Basically, when you're looking at a shot, you're looking, like most shots, when you look at a short game shot, there's probably a variety of different places you could land it. You could land it like chip and run right in front of you. You could land it up by the pin. You could land it anywhere in between. And depending on the height and the spin of the shot you hit, you can find the best landing zone and then figure out what shot works best for that. As an example. Oh, shoot. Talk about putting first, then I'll get to the examples. I forgot which one was next. Okay, it is a good idea to never discount the putter. Okay, putter. I think putting off the green falls into two categories of golfers. There's those that putt way too often. Okay, they putt any chance they can get. They putt, and then there's ones that never putt. They think that that's like a sign of weakness. When in reality, what you should be looking for is like there's definitely times when it makes sense to putt and times where it doesn't. Generally speaking, if the fringe is predictable, it's closely mown, it's cut nice, it's not all marked up with divots and ball marks, it might be a good time to putt. The lie is sketchy. If you walk up and it's like sitting on a bare spot, a sandy spot, a wet spot, something where you're like worried about flubbing it or things like that, the lie is sketchy, putter might be a good option. If you have lots of green to work with and just a little bit of fringe, let's say I'm sitting here and my ball is here and I've got just a couple of feet of fringe and like the pin's way out there, like the ball is in the air usually for the first 10% of a putt anyway. It probably won't even touch this fringe. So if you have a lot of green and not much fringe, putting makes a lot of sense. If the fringe and the green are similar speeds, putting makes a lot of sense. If you cannot find a good landing zone, everywhere you look looks like trouble, a bunch of mounds and transition zones and small targets, putting might make a lot of sense. And if your wedge game is trash, putting makes a lot of sense. But it's a good sign to work on your wedge game. All right. The opposite of that might be better off wedging if the fringe is sticky, bumpy, divoty, not in very good shape. If the fringe looks like it's going to be a problem, you might be more likely to chip. If the fringe is really slow, let's say the fringe is like hasn't been mown in a couple days, if the greens are fast, that's a hard one to judge where you got to hammer it through the longer grass, and then once it's on the green, it's lightning or downhill. That's a hard one to judge. It might be better off just chipping that one. If you have lots of fringe and not much green, you'd be better off chipping it because you're trying once again to factor in the difference in the speeds. If your lie is really good, looks good lie, I can chip this no problem. The landing zones are good, or if you're a great wedge player, you might decide to chip it more often. Make sense? But don't discount the putter. I like the putter a lot. You could also substitute putter for like hybrid or 5-wood. Some players like to pitch or hit those kind of shots with like a hybrid. It does kind of have the same effect as a putter. It basically rolls it along the ground, but it does bounce just a little bit more and kind of kicks it out of whatever little stuff there is. So you could interchange when to putt with when to hit like a hybrid. I used to do a lot of hybrid shots. I don't remember the last time I did one, but it's an effective way to do it if you just know how hard the ball is going to come off. All right. Now, here we go. Vincent van Gogh. All right, so these are some drawings, some expert drawings of green complexes. Okay, talking about landing zones. Usually, the darker area is going to be the fringe, and the lighter area is going to be the green. So let's just say this for example. So if we're looking at landing zones, we're thinking about which ones are good or bad. I would say this little concave upslope would be a great place to land a ball, probably with like a low, no spin, little bump and run shot. That would be one good place to land it. This mound, not so much, right? Landing it on top of the mound, if you you'd have to hit one that lands perfect. If it lands too far, it's gone. If it lands short, it might roll back to your feet. This little downslope might not be the best, but it is kind of concave in here, so maybe even a landing spot in here if you know how to put a little spin on it. All right, make sense? We're gonna go through a few of these.
Wait, can you actually try to hit like the mid part of the upslope with a low trajectory, low spin?
Possibly, yeah, for sure. If I was standing here, I'd be like, okay, I'm either going to try to bump it into this hill, or I'm going to fly it up into this concave and stop it with a little spin. One of those two would be, and then a lot of that would depend on maybe the lie. If the lie is sketchy, I might hit the low one. If the lie was sitting real pretty, I might hit the high one. But those would be like the two options I would go for. I would never try to, this area here, this mound would be completely off limits. I'm not looking at that at all. Next one, a little downslope to a little bowl. There's really only one place I wouldn't want to land this one. Anybody have a guess? Right where that little green turns into fringe, if you can imagine that in your mind. Because if we landed there and we catch the little piece of fringe, it can fringe boost, kick, kick hard. But this one you could pretty much do anything. You could hit a bump and run that lands here. You could hit a medium one that lands here, higher one that lands there. Because it's, once again, it's kind of got a little concaveness to it. A lot of good landing spots on that one. How about this one? This is like, a lot of these look like Omni. So Omni, if you play Omni a lot, Omni has a lot of, if you're in short grass at Omni, and this is not just Omni, a lot of golf courses, short grass is usually, at a lot of courses, the approaches up to the green are short grass. And a lot of times around the green is rough, a lot of times. Not everywhere, but it's very common. And a lot of times what they'll have at the front of that green is a little false, call it a false front, where there's a little drop off where the green kind of slopes down, and it sometimes will just take your ball and bring it right back to your feet, if anybody's ever had the experience and joy of doing that. Vista 3, right? So once again, landing spots here. I like this concave. I could hit a low bump and run there. I'm going to avoid the mound, or I could toss it medium high with some spin up into this flat spot, all of which are fine. But you're trying to learn, when you're looking at these short game shots, you're trying to figure out goods, bads, mediums. Does that make sense? How about this one? We got another good one here, terrible, and then if it lands here, we're down here. What happens if we pitch a ball to there? It's gone. Yeah, it doesn't matter how much spin you have on it. So really here, the only good one is probably this little concave spot. Up and overs, this is a common thing in golf, like putting or chipping. These little up and over ones where it's like uphill and then downhill are generally some of the hardest shots in golf, just in general, because you got to hammer it or hit it hard enough to cover the hill, or else it's rolling back to your feet. But if you get anything too much extra on it, it's gone. It's one of the worst place to be up and over. Oh, here we go. How about this one? Can we bump and run one into the hill? I see it just bouncing back to our feet, right? What about landing it right? Tiny, maybe. Anything that lands up here is going to take off. What would be a good option here? Take it past. I would putt this one. No good landing spots. I would just take out the putter and try to whack it up the hill. I'd make sure it got up the hill, and probably I'm going to end up a little past, but I'm not trying to get fancy there. This one. I hope you can, this is sand. Could be a puddle of some kind. It's sand. It's sand. It is yellow, yeah. I should have made it like dirt brown, I suppose. What about here? What are our landing spots? A little bit of rough. Do we have many options? Only one option, right? There's no option. It has to land somewhere here, and we're gonna need some kind of a high-ish or spinny shot to make that work, right? How about this one? Got a little bit of fringe, a little bit of green. You could putt it for sure. I think this one a lot of times, the reason I put this one up here is because I think a lot of times people will automatically say it's either a putt or a low bump and run here, low bump and run, which it could be for sure. Really, this is kind of a spot you could hit any shot in your, you could hit any shot in the world. You could hit low, medium, high. I would say in this case, you should hit your personal best shot, whatever you're best at. Doesn't, if you're like, for me, I'm kind of terrible at bumping and running it compared to other ones. So I probably would hit a little spinner in there, but I might tell my students that don't know how to hit a little spinner in there to bump and run it or maybe putt it, right? But any shot in the bag works for this one. Make sense? So when you're, next time you're playing golf and you get faced with a short game shot, I would like you to just look at all the little areas that you could land a ball. Try to pick a good one. Pick one that matches some of these characteristics. All right, questions about that? That's judgment, shot selection.
Is there ever a place at Interlochen where you think about hitting it past the hole and having it come back like it's
So good question. There's a couple of holes where it's possible. Typically, though, I try to avoid doing that as a rule. I typically will like, let's say, so we're saying that the flag is cut. There's a tier behind it that we might run it halfway up the tier and let it come back, right? My preference there is to, like, I'm never going to leave that shot short, okay? Because I've got the backstop behind to save me if I hit it a little long. But the problem with using the backstop is that if that's the target and you miss it, like a little too hot, then you're in deep trouble. So it's rare I'm going to use the backstop on purpose, but it might affect my shot. I might be okay hitting my shot a little, err on the side of hitting it a little firm. So like Vista 3, Vista 9, there's some big mounds. Eldo 4, for example, Eldo 6, but I don't necessarily want to, that wouldn't be the strategy, because once again, if you miss that and just overshoot it by a little bit, then you're cooked. Now you're probably worse off than you were before. That makes sense? Unless there's no other good landing spots, or maybe, like I said, if I have to hit it past because there's nowhere to hit it short, then I might do that. But it's not my first choice for sure.
And when's a good idea to take it?
Stay tuned. Okay, so in my fundamentals, we talked about shot selection, judgment, good landing zones. Now we're getting it into the nuts and bolts of like contact. So bear with me. I don't want it to get too complicated. But
bump and run.
Yeah.
You always use a wedge. You use say a 8 iron.
Stay tuned. You could, and not my preference. So I'll explain why. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it takes to make good contact. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to maybe consider adding some spin to your game. But it starts with just good contact. So good contact comes down to two things and two things only. All right, it only takes two things to make good contact. I drew this picture. I'm going to get in here. To make good contact, this ball is sitting on a tight lie. We have to have a good handle or a good awareness of two key concepts, one of which is one that I'll be using a lot from here on out tonight. It's called angle of attack. Angle of attack. What angle of attack is how much the club is descending or moving downwards when it strikes the ball. That's called angle of attack. So if the club is traveling down a lot, that's a steep angle of attack. If it's not traveling down much at all, it's a shallow angle of attack. Okay? Angle of attack, we'll get more into angle of attack in a second. But that's just as a definition. Angle of attack is how much up or down the club is traveling. Okay? And then the second big one for good contact is learning how to control your arc depth. All right, fancy words, but just think about it like this. When we swing a wedge, or any club, the club makes kind of a shape, okay? Hopefully it makes the shape that looks maybe like the bottom half of a circle, okay? My club is making a circular shape. It's moving down some of the time. It's moving up some of the time. There's a bottom to that circle. Does that sort of make sense, everybody? So like our club's making a circle. The arc depth refers to how high or low that circle is. It doesn't talk about, I'm not talking about the shape of the circle, the wideness, the narrowness. I'm just talking about, does that circle get to the grass? Does it get below the grass? Does it never get to the grass? That's arc depth. All right. So if we can control just those two things and keep those in mind when we're practicing and playing, and just make sure that those two are reasonably, we're reasonably good at those, then we will hit a lot less chunks and skulls and blades and all the bad shots that we're all here to avoid, hopefully. All right. So to talk a little bit more about those couple concepts. Our attack angle, in other words, how much we're hitting down on the golf ball, has to be within a certain window. Okay, it has to be within a certain window. It has to be somewhere between like 0 and 15 degrees for the face of the club to hit the ball. Okay, if we hit more down on it than that, what happens? Let's say I hit down on it 30 degrees. What part of the club is going to hit the ball? Let's say I'm hitting down on it a whole bunch. What part of the club is going to hit the ball? The leading edge, the blade, right? And that's usually never good, right? So if we hit down on it too much, like I can't hit down 90 degrees. I can't hit down 45 degrees. I have to hit down some amount to fit this little leading edge in between the equator of the ball and the ground, which is like, not that big a spot. It's kind of small little area. Does that make sense? And then the arc depth has to be enough to where we get the club to the ground. Club has to get to the ground for the most part, but just barely. Okay, if the club never ever gets to the ground, what part of the club hits the ball? Leading edge. If the club, if our arc depth is too deep, let's take our perfect little example here. If our arc depth is too deep, where does the club hit the ground? Hits the ground early, right? Hits the ground early, which usually isn't a good thing. Sometimes it can work out. I'm going to get into that in a second, but usually that's not a good thing. So if you're struggling with your contact, a good question to ask yourself is, do I think it's more angle of attack or arc depth or both? I'll tell you this. I have never met a player, good player, bad player, high handicapper, low handicapper. I've never met a player that's ever been too steep on a chip. Everybody is either fine or way too shallow. Okay, so if you're thinking you might want to change your attack angle, and I'm going to talk about how to do that in a second, then you probably need to err on the side of trying to get steeper, more down on it. If, on the other hand, you feel like your arc depth or your angle of attack is okay and you're hitting some good shots, you may not have very good control of your arc depth. Arc depth might be because we bounce around a little bit, move around, stand up. Maybe our arms and wrists are breaking down, things like that. I got it. But if you can do those two things, that's all it takes, assuming you don't hit the hosel. All right, I'm going to talk more about how to influence these factors, but does that make sense, at least in theory, kind of hypothetically? All right. One more concept here when it comes to angle of attack. So angle of attack being how much down we're hitting on the ball. Every swing that you make, regardless of what your arms, hands, wrists, how tight you grip it, whether you choke down, every swing that you make in your whole entire life has an element of time where the club is traveling down, and it has a moment in time where the club is traveling up, okay? When I tell players I want them to hit more down on the ball, what I am not asking them to do is slam the club into the ground. Okay? What I really am asking them to do is to hit the ball sooner in their swing when the club is still traveling down more. Does that make sense? Another way of saying that is I want the low point of the swing. Imagine I'm making this swing and it has this circle shape. It's got what's called a low point. That's the bottom of the circle. Generally, when I'm trying to get players to hit more down, I'm trying to make the bottom of the circle go forward. All right. So if my club is bottoming out back here by my back foot, I am going to be hitting the ball on the way up. Conversely, if my club is hitting the ground out here by my front foot, and let's say the ball is in the middle of my stance, that club is going to be traveling down. And I don't have to necessarily try to do anything weird with my motion to try to hammer down on the ball. That's one of the most common mistakes I see when it comes to when somebody tells me you got to hit down on it. It's like, oh, bam. That's not how you do it. You just, if I play the ball in the back and I'm hitting the ground out here, I'm going to be hitting the ball very, very, very much on the way down. All right, makes sense so far? We're going to get more into this a little bit. But you just got to understand a couple of these little concepts when it comes to good contact. Questions about this so far? All right. Generally, I would say this kind of stuff, it is helpful to have some kind of a measurement device if you're trying to figure this stuff out. So maybe you have something at the house that can measure these things, or you can rent some space at Golf Galaxy on their TrackMan. Come see me, come see Alicia for a lesson. We can help you determine what your attack angle might be and whether it's too much, not enough. And that can help speed things along versus trying to do it on your own. All right.
Dan, I'm surprised you gave the attack angle 0 to 15 because I'm always trying to stay away from 0.
So so that's a good point. So 0 attack angle is functional, but not great. Because let's say we go for 0 attack angle. Let's say we're trying to hit this ball right at the very bottom of our swing arc, and we mess up a little bit. I'm trying to go for 0, and all of a sudden I hit it up 1 or up 2. So hitting up on the ball, any amount of up here, once we start hitting up on the ball, we are either going to put the leading edge into the ball, no good, or we're going to hit the ground first, also no good. So even though 0 theoretically works, it's like too close to the edge of the window to like pursue that. Same with 15. 15 is the max you can hit down on it, maybe 16. So like a good rule of thumb for this is somewhere in the middle of this is pretty safe. Somewhere between 4, 5, 6, up to 10. Those are pretty good attack angles. But the 0 to 15 is just what's like feasibly possible. Make sense? All right. What do I have next? God, I forgot. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a challenge. Name a sport. Everybody here plays multiple sports. Name a sport. Pickleball. I knew pickleball was going to be the first one. That is played with a ball. That is played with a ball where spin does not matter. Yeah, even pickleball, spin matters, right? I looked that one up, spin matters. People like skip it off. Yeah. At least when it comes to going from, say, a novice or beginner to going maybe to more an intermediate. Like if you go watch a bunch of 7-year-olds playing soccer, you're not seeing them bend it like Beckham, right? But when you get to the more advanced levels of any sport, you start to see things like spin, baseball, we're curving the pitches, tennis, all kinds of spin in tennis, bowling, or you go to the lanes on a Saturday, you watch the kids bowling it straight, you turn on pro bowling, what are they doing? Spinning it, right? Ping pong, soccer, billiards, you name it. Every sport, if you want to go from total rank beginner to like half intermediate advanced, you need to learn how to apply and control spin. And golf is certainly no different. Although I think a lot of players are intimidated by trying to spin it. They think it's too complicated. It's not. All right. So next little bit, I'm going to talk about spin. These are some general concepts, okay? Spin in golf is created by what's this concept called spin loft. Anybody ever heard of spin loft? It's not that well known out there, okay? Spin loft is just a fancy term for the difference between how much down we hit on the ball. So let's pretend I'm going to hit down on the ball 8 degrees, whatever that is. And then I'm going to apply some loft to it. Let's say I'm using my 60-degree wedge, so I've got some amount of loft. The difference between that angle of attack and the loft on the club is what's called spin loft. All right? And the bigger that is, the more spin you can put on the ball. The smaller it is, the less spin. So think about like a putt, for example. When we're hitting a putt, are we hitting down or up on a putt really? Kind of pretty flat with a putt, right? How much loft is on a putter? Basically zero. So putter's traveling this way, face is pointing that way. We're not putting much spin on a putter. Does that make sense? If we want to add some spin though, like with a wedge, we're gonna hit a little more down, add a little loft. Hit a little more down, add a little more loft. If we do that, we start to open up this spin loft, and that's what gives us the chance to put some backspin on it, which is nice. Backspin is a good thing to have in golf. It gives you a lot more shot options around the green. It makes the ball slow down when it lands and come to rest real quick.
We were saying this, for example, if your wedge is a 56-degree wedge,
Mhm.
and you're coming in a 6-degree angle attack, you get spin off.
If you so let's say you are hitting 56-degree wedge and you're hitting down, let's say 4 degrees, and let's just say your 56-degree wedge is actually 56 at impact, because it might not be, but if it is, your wedge is at 56, your angle of attack is 4 down, you're going to have 60 degrees of spin loft. Make sense? Difference. It's the delta between those. This is where it gets a little tricky, so I'm going to just try to follow along. All right, so key consideration to understand, we already talked about angle of attack and low point, we already talked about dynamic, we already talked about loft. That gives us our spin loft. We've got our arc depth, which we've already covered. We've got turf-grass interaction and friction as our two other main things that are to be considered. Friction in golf is what also makes spin happen. So let's say we've got some spin loft. Let's say we're hitting down on it with some loft. If the grooves are clean and you're playing a good ball, then the grooves are going to cut into the cover a little bit, and it's gonna give you some friction, okay? That's gonna put spin on the ball. If, for example, let's say your ball's in the rough and there's a bunch of grass in between the club and the ball, what do you think happens to the amount of friction? Goes down, right? Less friction, so therefore less spin. You got it. So friction happens, the most friction happens when the grooves of the club are clean, new, and the ball is a good ball. All right, so range balls, don't count. Value balls, don't count. You're not going to get much spin. So if you're not looking to play like a tour level ball, you're probably not going to see much spin regardless.
Does it matter if it's a soft or like the horn and the suckers like your girls always give us the soft?
They always give the girls the softs. They're doing you a huge disservice.
I'm starting to think that.
Yeah.
So
So
I think the B1 will get more spin.
so the softs, pretty much any ball that has soft in the name means it has a soft core inside. So it makes it feel soft, but doesn't mean the cover is soft. And the cover is the key part here. We need the cover to be soft so that the grooves can cut in there. So for ladies, a lot of times people market these like low compression soft balls, and that's just awful, unfortunately. You would be way better off with a tour ball. Now the only good ball with soft in the name is the Chrome Soft. So Callaway's Chrome Soft is good, but their Super Soft is garbage. All right. Yep. So Chrome Soft good. Any other, like Titleist makes a True Soft, they're trash. It's not that they're bad. I mean, they just don't spin. You know, it's like, they don't spin, they don't stop, they don't have any lift. I watch my poor junior golfers in Operation 36 all the time, hitting these balls that are super bright colors made for juniors, and none of them, I mean, they hit crisp little shots and the ball just rockets over the green. I'm like, one of these days we got to get these kids upgraded. But with that said, it's hard to give your 6-year-old a $7 golf ball. Not going to lie. But a good ball is a requirement for this, for sure. All right. Just going to talk real quick about the spin loft mountain. So when we're talking about that spin loft, so we're opening it up, we're hitting down, we got a lofted club. We can get about 55 degrees or so, maybe up to 60, before we start to get slippage and sliding. So I always like to think about it like, the analogy I would make is like, let's say you've got really grippy shoes on and you're climbing up a rock wall that looks like this, right? So your grippy shoes, you're on this rock wall. Your shoes will grip, they'll grip to a point, and then there'll be a point where that wall is so steep where they stop gripping and you start sliding, and once anything past that point, we lose all of our friction. The ball comes off straight up in the air and goes nowhere. So we usually don't want to try to go crazy on the spin loft. It's not like just more spin, more spin, more spin, more spin, more spin, more spin. It's more like more, none immediately. That's probably the most in-depth thing tonight, although there's a lot. Loss of friction can occur from a couple different things. Once again, if we go too much spin loft, we lose friction. If there's any grass, sand, dirt, moisture, anything on the ball, anything on the club, anything that gets in between, then we lose our friction. I don't want to know what you're thinking, Cindy. Older dirty grooves, dirty minds, value golf ball versus your thing cover. Loss of friction will generally equal way higher launches, way less distance, and way lower backspin. And you'll see this even on the driving range. If you're used to playing like a good ball, and you go to the driving range and hit your, say, lob wedge, on the range you'll notice it launches way higher and goes way shorter. And then you'll go on the course and hit that real ball, and it'll typically launch a little lower.
Less distance. I would have expected it to go farther with less spin, depending on trajectory.
It depends. So like in the case of once you let's say you open the face of your sand wedge a whole bunch, the friction that causes the ball to come off lower and spinnier goes away. So now all of a sudden it just goes up, and it comes off slower. With say a pitching wedge or a 9-iron, it might actually go a little further. All right, last kind of concept here before we get to the very, very end. There's a big debate in golf, and when I say big debate, I'm not joking. There was almost a fist fight at the open forum last year, which is like golf's big meeting gathering of top teachers. And it happens at the PGA show. It's like 10 p.m. at night. Everybody's lubed up, and these guys had to be pulled apart, talking about what type of contact is preferable. There's two ways to hit these shots off tight lies. One way is called using the bounce. Has anybody ever heard that term, use the bounce? Anybody know what the bounce of the club is? If I held the club up here, could you point at the bounce? Where is the bounce? Right at the bottom here. So this see how the club is just sitting here? You can actually probably see this a little bit clearer. See that roundy spot? That's called the bounce. So there's a school of thought in the short game where it's called using the bounce, where we're trying to basically hit the ground with that rounded sole part. All right, we're trying to hit the ground with that roundy sole part. And when that happens, if it's the right kind of turf, that club will slide for a little ways, a couple inches across the ground. All right, and because it's sliding on the turf and not bouncing off of it or digging in, a lot of times that we can kind of hit the ball almost a little heavy, hit the ground a little bit first, and still hit a fine golf shot because the club is like sliding on the turf for 3 or 4 inches. So that's one way to hit a shot. We'll get more into when to use the bounce and when not to. Versus more nowadays, a lot of players are going to ball first contact, where they're trying to hit down on it more, hit the ball before the ground so they have clean turf contact. I can tell you for me, I probably spent, if you've taken a short game lesson from me, anytime before this year, I probably talked a lot about using the bounce. I guarantee I did, because that's what I did. I used the bounce all the time. That's the way I did it. I had the face open. I was trying to scuff the grass, and if I chunked it a little bit, it was always okay. This year I switched over to more of this style, and my short game's gotten a little bit better because of that. They both have their place. There's no right or wrong answer, in my opinion. These guys shouldn't have been fist fighting. There's a time and a place for both.
What convinced you to switch?
I was sick of flubbing it. And basically, when you use the bounce, you are relying on the turf to slide the club for you. And sometimes the turf is great for that. Like if it's like a nice summer day and the grass isn't too wet or too dry, then it slides nicely. But there's a lot of times where I would be out playing and the turf was wet, sandy, rock hard, firm, and the slide really wasn't available. So I would find myself trying to hit this shot and it would come off a lot of times chunked, flubbed, because it was wet or because there was a whole bunch of sand there, or it might bounce off of it if it was rock hard. So I found that I was relying too much on the quality of the turf to hit this shot everywhere. Now I still hit this shot sometimes when the turf is really nice, but I don't hit it all the time.
This would be like into the grain Bermuda would be.
Not the time. Not the time. Yeah, into the grain Bermuda, absolutely the worst time to use the bounce, because it doesn't matter. The club will, the Bermuda grass growing in is going to grab leading edge and make a giant mess of things, and the ball might even go like a foot. We've seen it. I see it on like Tigers flubbed some pitches just horribly trying to use the bounce into the green. So there are some pros to it. It does allow you to hit the turf first, which can be good. Gives us a little bit margin of error. It's easier to hit it high because we're not hitting down on it so much. We can open up the face a lot. When we open up the face, we add loft, and we also expose more of the bounce. So it gives us a little bit higher shot. We don't have to worry as much about attack angle. The downside of it is very turf dependent. It's less consistent friction. Sometimes you'll have clean contact where it spins a lot. Sometimes it'll launch high with no spin. It's kind of hard to predict. And the miss is usually going to be, for players that are using the bounce, they're usually going to flub it, chunk it a little bit. It's usually not the end of the world. It's not the worst chunk, but it just kind of dies out short.
You're talking about this with a tight line.
We'll get there. These things always go so much. It's like it's already been an hour. I'm going to keep going though. Okay, ball first. We'll get to the rough though in a second. Ball first contact. This is what I've gone to more often, where we're hitting down on it more, hitting the ball first more. The good part of that is that it can be used in any turf condition. Doesn't matter. More predictable launches and spins, more friction, more backspin. Cons are it may require a little more precision. We're trying to slide that club into a very small window. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Everybody in here can do it. Don't be scared. But we're trying to slide that club into this like tight little window. And the misses are oftentimes a little bit more thin. Those are the two main types though. I'm going to skip this slide. It's long. All right. If you were going to train a shot, let's say you have a launch monitor. It doesn't even have to have all like the TrackMan features. If you were going to try to work on creating spin, here's the situation you want to try to create. And we can do this in a lesson. You can do this at a golf facility that has any launch monitors. But if you want to learn what spin loft feels like, getting the angle of attack down and the loft to go up, you'd be looking to hit a golf shot that's 15 yards. This is just a good metric. It shows you whether you're doing it or not. You'd be looking to hit a 15-yard shot, 15 yards of carry, launches at 30 degrees, spins at 5,000 or more. Right? If you can hit that shot, or if I can teach you how to hit that shot, or if Alicia can teach you how to hit that shot, or if anybody can teach you how to hit that shot, or if you can just stand there and figure it out, you've learned everything you need to know about spin loft. But nobody, I mean, I would imagine nobody in this room could probably do it at first without instruction. You have to learn how to hit down a lot. You have to learn how to open the face to create a big amount of spin loft. But that's the ticket right there. If you ever are messing around on a launch monitor with real balls, I would be trying to hit that shot. And if you can't do it, let me know. Mat's totally fine. Mat's totally fine. Because if you chunk it on a mat, it's going to launch higher and spin less. So you can't get away with chunking it on a mat, just like in a normal swing. So you can.
If you were trying to practice those numbers,
Yep. Wouldn't matter. So you can totally do this inside. In fact, it's probably better inside. Like better inside as long as you have real ball. Because it's so flat and so like there's not going to be any sand, water, grass blades that get in the way. I can just concentrate just on creating the geometry it takes for that.
With the drivers, there's probably no spin at all.
Drivers less, right? So if you think about our spin loft really quick, wedges we're hitting down with a lot of loft. Driver, we might be even hitting it what? Up. And does driver have much loft? Not much. This is what a driver spin loft might look like. Maybe the angle of attack is up 1 or 2 and the driver's got 10 degrees of loft or so. It's probably maybe 11 degrees. So it spins some, and we want it to spin some. Otherwise, it just falls out of the air, but it doesn't spin nearly as much as these little wedge shots. All right, what about the rough? Rough is pretty quick. When we're in the rough, our friction goes down, right? There's grass in the way. When the friction goes down, the launch angle or the trajectory goes up, all right? The arc depth is less important, okay? We don't have to hit it perfect because has anybody ever found that they hit it better out of the rough? I mean, I think most players do, right? It's because you don't have to be as precise, right? The ball is in the rough, but it's also sitting on like a cloud of rough. So there's a whole bunch of rough underneath. As long as you get the club deep enough to get it under the ball and not so deep that we go right under it, it's going to be fine. You got a huge margin of error in the rough. It's awesome. Angle of attack doesn't really matter in the rough because we don't have to like slide the club in perfect. You can even hit up on it in the rough, which I do sometimes when I really want to launch it high. We're giving away the friction on purpose. I'm not going to get into that too much. But there's basically two types of shots I talked about at the beginning. I've got two ways to hit a shot out of the rough that you'll see. When you watch tour golf, you'll see these two shots. First one I call like a direct hit. So imagine this ball's in the rough. We've got our club. We lean the handle forward a little bit. We hit down on it a little bit. And the goal is to like basically hit the back of the ball with the face of the club. Now there's going to be some grass in the way, right? You're going to have to judge how much speed or how dead the ball is going to come off with that. But we're just basically hitting a direct hit on the back of the ball. The ball is going to come off medium, low, and it's not going to have any spin. It's going to roll out, right? Pretty basic shot. You just have to judge how much the grass is going to kill it. I don't have to get into too much of this. The other shot that we use in the rough that you'll see a lot is the super open faced one. So you'll see players take the club and lay it almost, so it's like almost facing the ceiling, almost vertical. The ball is sitting here. We're making a big swing kind of, and we're basically trying to like slide under the ball, almost missing it essentially, kind of cutting the legs out from under it. And with that this much loft, if any part of the face catches any part of the ball, it just floofs up in the air. It's a really good one for like when you're in the rough and you've got a little bit of green to work with and you just got to like pop it over the rough and have it not take off. A little slide under shot. If you have those two shots in the rough, you are in good shape. A lot of,
Question.
yeah.
So if you're in the rough, but the ball is sitting down, or if it's really thick, you're going to want to do that first time shot.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So, good question though. So let's say the ball is sitting down. There is a difference between sitting down and sitting on the earth. Okay, so it could be sitting down a whole bunch, but if you get the sense that there's even like this much more grass under it, you can absolutely slide the club under. The only time it will not work is if you feel like that ball is sitting down and is in like an old divot or a dead spot, and it's actually sitting on the actual mud, the actual dirt, then you cannot go under it in that scenario. But it could be sitting 3 inches down in 5 inches of rough, and you still got 2 inches underneath it to slide it under. And in fact, I would actually recommend more often in that case the slide under shot, where we open it up and slide it under. That shot can be hit with a ton of speed. Okay, you can hit that shot real hard and the ball doesn't go anywhere. And that speed might be in your best interest if you're trying to cut through thick, heavy rough, versus if you're trying to direct hit it and kind of baby it a little bit to just bump it out of there. That thick, heavy rough it's very easy to hit that ball like nowhere. So I'm not saying you always go under it, but it needs to be sitting like on dirt before you just totally take the slide under one out of consideration. Good question. No, that's a good question. Questions about the rough? All right. Common mistakes that I see. Boy, I've taught a lot of short game lessons. Okay. Hardly anybody that in a first short game lesson, people don't consider the turf and the lie very much at all. When I ask them what they're thinking about the landing spot, but they're thinking about distance control usually. And it's like, distance control does not matter if you make terrible contact, right? And usually I would even say that like when you're out there practicing your short game, if your contact sucks, you're never going to be good at distance control because you'll do what I see all these lessons do, where let's say you're trying to hit it 20 feet and you get up there and you blade it and it goes rocketing over the green 50, 60, 70 feet hot. The next one you're going to do, you're probably going to like baby it because you're so scared of sending it over. So your distance control cannot progress until your contact is okay-ish. That makes sense? So pay attention to the lie, the turf, the grass, where the ball is, is the ball sitting up in the rough? Another common one I'll see is that ball that's sitting down in the rough, and I'll see that player do their practice swings, and they're barely hitting the top of the grass. The ball is sitting down, their club is just barely hitting the top of the grass, and they get over it and scull the snot out of it, and they're shocked. And I'm like, maybe to get that club, ball sitting down, maybe we need to get that club down there a little lower, right? That's the kind of stuff you definitely need to be paying as much attention to, paying more attention to than you might otherwise. We're not paying it. That goes into the arc depth. How How deep is the club getting into the turf? Most common, like I said earlier, I see two shallow angles of attack. I never have seen anybody that's too steep. I see a lot of bad setups. The most common one, think about what this does. Player's been told, okay, I want to have a narrow stance. I'm going to choke down, ball in the back, lean the handle forward a lot. I see this one a lot. Okay. Now, do I have a bunch of shaft lean? Shafts lean forward, right? Shafts leaning forward. If I just move my shoulders, which way is this club going to swing when I have this much tilt up here? Anybody take a guess? We're going to be going up on the ball. Even if the handle's leaning forward, it's going to be up into it. And that's the most common setup error I see. I see a lot of, okay, get your weight left. Okay. Okay, now I'm exaggerating to an extent, but people get their weight over here, but they lean their body behind it. You're way better off in general getting your chest out in front of the ball, your shoulders a little more level. I'm standing like this, and I make it just, even if I don't use my wrists at all, which way is the club going to be traveling when it gets to the ball? Down, versus if I'm like this, up, chunk, flub, dead. That's the most common setup error I see. I see a lot of times too many moving parts. People bouncing around up and down, people using a lot more wrist action than you might need. Talking about wrists, I just really quickly on the wrists. I don't want like locked out wrists, because when we lock out our wrists, we start to do things with our body that maybe aren't good. Like if I locked out my wrist, what happens to my body? It starts doing this kind of stuff, right? That's not good for low point control. But if I hinge my wrists a lot, the only way to get back to the ground reliably is I have to unhinge them the exact same amount that they went going back. This is why hinge and hold is like a crock of nonsense. Hinge and hold, not to get off topic for a second, but like players that talk about hinge and hold, it's like, well, I just hinge it and then I just hold that angle through. And I'm like, okay, how do you ever hit the ground? Have you ever hit the ground in your life? Because when we hinge it, right? I mean, they've probably, so when you hinge it, this club gets closer to my chest. And if I hold that, it's like miles off the ground, right? So hinging it is okay as long as you unhinge it about the same amount. So you can totally hinge and unload it, or just as simply you could not hinge it much at all. But trying to match up moving parts is a big part of short game lessons when I'm looking at short game shots. I see a lot. Generally, I see too many moving parts. I don't usually see the opposite very often. I see a lot of falling backwards through the shot. So imagine what I was doing earlier. A lot of this. What does that do to my low point? If I fall back, where does my low point go? Backwards. That causes me to hit more on the way. Got it. I have a lot of players that are scared of opening the club face. Anybody scared of opening the face ever in your life? They're scared of it. They don't like that idea of taking the club face, twisting it a couple degrees open. And then once they do it, they way overdo it. So it's like I'll have a guy, I'm like, just open the face a little bit. And it's like, just, sometimes it just takes a little tiny bit of club face open to get the spin loft and all those things. Make sense so far? Questions?
This is for a friend of mine.
Okay. Asking for a friend. Got it.
You'll have a real delicate chip.
Yes.
And he'll do a TC chin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hit it twice.
So what's he doing and how's he fixing it? And again, it's
yeah, for a friend. So I'll tell you what he thinks he's doing. So he thinks he's decelerating. He thinks he's decelerating, which he's not. What he's doing is he's hitting the ground before the ball, for sure. He's hitting the ground before the ball, which slows down the club for a split second, and then the club hits the ball. And then as his body continues on through, and his arms continue on through, and get released off the ground. So plunk, ball takes off, ball comes off real slowly, real dead, because he chunked the snot out of it. And then his arms and body pull the club back around, back up to the normal speed. Remember, so it's almost like this. We swing, the club hits the ground and kind of stops for a second, hits the ball poorly, Ball comes off slow. He's continuing through the shot, and then the club comes rocketing past, and he hits it again on the way by. TC Chen. Well, that's what he's doing, for sure. And then somebody's going to tell him he's decelerating. So he's going to sit there on his next one and be like, ugh, and try to gun it, and he's either going to rocket it over the green or when you accelerate too much, kind of off topic, when you accelerate too much on a short little shot, you inevitably are going to fall back from trying to accelerate the club. In other words, if you're trying to move the club real fast this way, something has to move this way, and it's going to be your body, and that's going to move your low point farther back, and we're going to not be very happy campers. Make sense? Sound about right for your friend? Next time you see your friend, yeah, tell him his low point control sucks. All right, back to a couple of these myths. Each club has a ratio of carry and roll. Is that true or false? Why is that false? Too many variables, right? Like if I can hit the same shot and it's downwind, downhill, and it rolls a mile, and then hit the same shot into the wind and it stops on a dime, this whole idea of like 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 it's very incorrect, unfortunately, and it's way too basic. So carrying will depend on these types of things. When in doubt, keep it low. I would suggest when in doubt, hit the best landing spot. That might be a low one, but it doesn't have to be. 60-degree wedges are only for good players. 60-degree players are for any player that wants to add some spin to your game. So if you don't have a 60 and you want to start experimenting with spin, it's not that daunting. It's really just 2 or 3 little things to work on. It'll take your short game to a whole nother level if you know how to control and add a little bit of spin. Just like spin helps players in every single other sport go from total noob to somewhat intermediate, look like you know what you're doing.
You know, there's some manufacturers of 60-degree wedges you say, oh my God, that's like a super soft ball. In other words, it's just not worth the money.
Not really. I would say all the major brands make really good ones. Yeah, TaylorMade, Titleist, Cleveland. I think all the manufacturers make. I have my preferences, but any brand that's like serious golf brand, their 60 is going to have really good grooves, and that's really what you're paying for. And as long as you don't get some crazy weird sole design or bounce, it should be fine. Do we hit down to make the ball go up? Hitting down makes the ball go lower, all right? Hitting down makes the ball go lower. Your worst putt is better than your best chip. We already talked about that one. Your worst putt is better than your... Good. All right. Sorry, I've kind of blazed through the end there, but that's some ideas for the short game. I hope you have an understanding that at least know what to look for when you are practicing. Think about things like angle of attack a little bit. Am I hitting down or up on it? Is my low point somewhat consistent? Am I digging every shot into the turf? Am I not hitting the turf at all? If you just do those things, you'll get good contact. If you want to add spin to your arsenal, it's easy to do. It doesn't take PGA Tour levels of speed. Oh, you're good. Like we can't all hit it 300 yards in the air like at sea level like the tour players, but we all in this room, everybody in this room physically could learn how to spin the living daylights out of it from 10, 20, 30 yards if you wanted to. It's not as challenging as you might think, and it would make your short game way better if you invest in good balls and good gear. Questions?
Instead of 54 to 56
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell any difference.
There's not much difference, right? There's only 2 degrees aloft. Yeah, 2 degrees aloft isn't very much difference. I would probably tell you, ditch one of them and get a 60.
Another question.
Oh, go ahead.
Is the diameter exactly the same of all golf balls?
Nowadays, yes. Back in like the 70s and 80s, there was like a British ball that was a little smaller. Actually, no. There's a ball out there that's a little bit bigger that's legal. I kind of wish they made it with a good cover because it does a little bigger ball, gives you a little more wiggle room, but it's like I can't remember the name of it, but it's a little bit bigger. It doesn't go as far because it's bigger, and it doesn't have a good cover on it, so it's not made for good players. It's made for people that top every single ball they've ever hit in their life. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but there is one out there. I just can't remember the name of it.
And is there a little, I call it a little divot, a little indentation
dimples.
There's over 200 of those.
Oh yeah.
Is it a code, some kind of golf code? There's exactly the same number?
No, they're all different. All different. So they manufacturers design. So these dimples are what give the ball its aerodynamic characteristics. So depending on the type of cover and the type of core and the type of golfer they're looking for, they can make certain dimple designs that go lower or go higher or go in between. Other questions? Yeah.
And I guess it's in the setup category. What do you think about grip pressure?
Mine is generally kind of light, but the way I would describe it is, and this goes back to, this is like big picture stuff. Does the ball know what your grip pressure is? So like, for example, when we're talking about making good contact, we're trying to hit a little bit down and have the arc depth right. But that's what must happen. Can that happen with light grip pressure? Sure. Can it happen with tight grip pressure? Absolutely. I'm not saying one, or there's probably pros and cons to each, but it would be in the category of more player preference. Doesn't need to be soft hands. It can be you can have the firmest grip in the world and still deliver a soft spinning shot, because the tightness of the grip can't be known by the ball. Yeah. You can have too much spin loft, and you can have too much spin for the shot at hand. So if you go over the spin loft mountain, you'll go more than 60 degrees of spin loft. That's too much. Then it won't spin at all. And you can have too much spin for the shot at hand. Yes, like let's say you're hitting it into the wind, into a slope, and you hit the maximum spinner. It might land and roll off the front. It's rare on short game shots to have too much spin. It's more common in like full swing wedges that you can have too much spin. That's when you have to know when those circumstances arise. You got 110 yards into a big wind and the green is sloped like this and it's fast. You know that hitting that hard gap wedge is going to rip off the front. That's too much. It's not necessarily too much spin. It's too much spin for that scenario.
And what's your ideal stance and setup, and how does it vary from chip?
So real quick, I prefer a narrowish stance. Okay. For the low spinner, the ball is going to be pretty far back. My chest is going to be pretty far forward. Okay, think of your chest or your collar of your shirt as that's kind of a good indicator of where the low point's going to be. Okay, where the low point of the swing is going to be. So if my ball is up here and my chest is back here, I'm going to be hitting more up on it. Okay, so I want my chest a little in front of the ball a little bit back for a low spinning shot. I'm going to have the club face 5, 6, 7 degrees open. And then I'm just going to let the club kind of rise up and just come right back down to the turf. Generally, that's kind of the overall picture. If I wanted to hit a little bit higher, I'd take everything the same. I'd move the ball a little more towards the middle. So I'm still hitting down on it, but maybe instead of hitting 10 down, I'm hitting 5 down. Now I'm still delivering the same spin loft. It's just going to launch a little higher because I'm not hitting down as much. Okay? If I have to go crazy and hit a high one, it's going to be turf dependent. Ball goes forward, things get dicey. But that's the general setup. Chest in front of the ball back-ish, handle forward a little bit, and just, I would say, last comment on that, is try not to let your shoulders tilt too much this way, okay? I kind of try to feel like I throw my shoulders a little more level, almost like that.
You're like 70% on your front foot?
I would say at least, maybe 80. Yeah, my chest is almost directly over my left shoe. So most of my weight's over there. But I'm doing that by shifting my trunk over there, not by shifting my hips over there, which then tilts my chest actually behind the ball, which is no bueno. Good question. Other questions? One? No?
It's a definition, context. Jordan Spieth just did one of those YouTube warming up things. I always
Okay.
ask the guys one tip to give
Yep.
to
Thank you.
amateurs and pro-ams.
Yeah.
He's like, I typically only deal with short game. Like, the most common fault in amateurs with chipping is not covering the ball.
Okay. So typical tour player response, right? Vague, not measurable. That's how all tour player responses are. They don't know. I'll tell you this. Tour players are great at golf. Most of them have no idea how to teach somebody anything about golf. When they talk about covering the ball, is they're talking about basically taking your sternum, your center of mass, and putting it on top, feeling like it's on top of where the ball is as opposed to behind it. So covering would be like my sternum feels like it's kind of on top of where the ball is resting as opposed to maybe like a big driver. I'm like, ball's up here, my chest is back here, I'm hitting up on this thing, I'm not covering the ball. It's a real crappy golf term, but you know, but a lot of teachers use it. I use it occasionally, but it's not like a very specific one. It can hit, it can definitely cause a lot of like lack of rotation, and people are trying to like just keep their chest pointed down, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Kind of a vague one. A lot of those vague golfisms, like, you know, you just got to get through it a little more. Okay, whatever.
I'm curious about takeaway.
Yeah.
Normally, if you're gonna make a full swing, you're gonna make a full turn, and then you
Yeah.
can come back to it.
Okay.
So when you're doing a shorter shot
Yep.
like this, you're not coming inside as far either, right? How are
My
you varying your
so my
takeaway?
preference on the takeaway is going to be compared to a full swing. I generally try to teach the club going a little more up and out, a little less low and around than a full swing. And a lot of that up and out is going to come from like a little tilt to the left, not a lot of wrist hinge, just a little tilt to the left, a little bit of this, just a hair, a little bit of arm lift that gets me out in front of it and lets me deliver it down. But a little bit outside in is preferable. You out of here? Good question. Any other questions?
Can you change from the bouncy chip to the more contact?
Ball first?
Did you change the grind on your wedges?
I did not. I was waiting for a grind question though. Okay, so if you're, the question is, do you change the, you know, if you look at Titleist's website, there's 100 different grinds, different shapes to the sole. Generally speaking, think about it like this. If you're hitting ball first, the grind doesn't matter because you're leaning the handle forward enough. This is a 60-degree wedge. I'm hitting it with like 40 degrees aloft. I'm hitting it more leaned forward than the bounce is going to interact with anything. So it doesn't matter. The bounce only matters when you're either using the bounce or if you're hitting bunker shots. So I like the way it felt on using the bounce shots, and I like how it works in bunker, so I didn't change my bounce at all. My lob wedge is lowish, not the lowest, lowish bounce on the 60. And then I've got a lot more on my sand wedge so that if I do find myself in a spot where I want a lot of bounce, like a fluffy bunker, those do exist, by the way. A fluffy bunker, if you've ever seen such a thing. A lot of times I'll use my higher bounce 56 so that it doesn't dig into the sand like my 60 might. But if you ever play a bunker where there's not as much sand, you might want a little sharper bounce so you can dig into that secondary layer of clay. Questions? Any other questions?
You choke down on your club, like you look at a lot of pros, just what, maybe 2-inch gap
Mhm.
between the top of their club and where their left hand.
Yeah, I don't, but I have no problem with it. I have no problem with it. There's pros and cons to like choking down slows down the club, which usually is good for short game. To me, it always feels a little weird, like it feels lightweight and the grip feels tiny. So I'm not a huge choker downer, but I'd say on tour it's probably 50-50. I wouldn't say it's for sure better one way or the other. I am. I'm like 6'4". I'm just kidding. But no, but my clubs are longer than standard. So, but yeah, I don't choke down just because it feels weird to me. Good questions. All right, if you have follow-up questions, send me an email if you want. I'll be posting this video on YouTube. If anybody wants it, it'll be on my channel.
Oh, you're
Probably.
posting this as a video?
Mhm.
A whole entire thing?
Yeah. If anybody has to review anything, fire away. Anyway, it's on there. It'll be on there later tonight. Pardon? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I will.
Sure. Yeah. If you missed anything, or if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, whatever, let me know. There's some stuff in there that I kind of blazed through because the time was running out. But yeah, if you have any follow-up questions or anything, reach out. If you want to know your numbers a little bit better, Alicia and myself certainly be happy to, hit some pitches and chips with you so you can see what 55-degree spin loft actually feels like, and then you can apply that to your short game in 2026 and learn how to rip the cover off the ball, which is super rewarding. So
So the goal for that,
awesome.
again, so I don't just walk through the whole video, is 15-yard shot.
15-yard shot,
5,000 RPM.
5,000 RPM, 30 launch.
And 30 launch.
Got it.